Hello everyone, and welcome to Scenario Planning for Teachers. We have a lot of teachers joining us today, which is really, really cool. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of people who join right as we get started. I'm nodding right as I'm letting a bunch of people in. So we have teachers joining us from all over, which is really, really exciting, and we are so thankful to have you all here today. Feel free to engage in the chat. We would love to see where you guys are joining us from. So as guidelines are being distributed in the coming weeks for schools to reopen, we wanted to have a session that would hopefully leave teachers better equipped for the changing and the many responsibilities that are going to be asked of you. So this session will count as 2 contact hours through the Stark County ESC, or you can get it approved through your ESC if you're not in Stark County. After this, I'm taking attendance, so I will be sending out a certificate of completion for all of you. At the end of each presentation, each person will give a presentation. We'll have a short time for specific questions for that person. So type your questions in the chat, and I will go through. I'll be keeping track of those and asking them after each session. At the end of the full presentation, I hope we have time to have more of a discussion where we can all join us back on the screen and talk. We're really happy at the Canton Symphony to be able to offer this and our other online programming for free. So we really hope that you check out all of the stuff that we're doing here at the Symphony. And if you're able, give a small donation the next time you reserve a ticket for one of these programs. So we have 6 wonderful presenters here today. We have Michelle Charles, Dr. Denise Seachrist, Dr. Britt Cooper, Jason Wyse, Rachael Fleischaker, and Gail Martino. So if you guys want to go ahead and mute and turn off your videos, we will start with Michelle. So Michelle has been the president and CEO of the Canton Symphony Orchestra since 2011, previously serving in all capacities as a chorus member and volunteer board trustee and staff. She continues to be a driving force behind the increasing notoriety of the Canton Symphony. Michelle holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in music theory and history from Hiram College, where she graduated summa cum laude. She is currently on the task force for the reopening of orchestras in Ohio. So Michelle, if you want to get going.
All right, well, thank you, Rachel. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen for you, so give me 1 second. I don't know why it's not, hold on 1 second. It's not giving me my options here. Well, okay. If someone could let me know if you are seeing.
I can see your screen.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Okay.
There we go.
I always forget that it's a little bit weird on my Surface. Okay, so what I've done here is I have come up with a little bit of a version of what I did when I was thinking about how I wanted to plan for what the symphony would be doing after the outbreak of COVID. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of the steps of how I kind of thought through it and hope that maybe that will help you in your thinking. So we'll just dive right in. So it's really important to think about the different versions of how the classes could be taught. So first of all, we have online only classes, and everything's virtually, no students are in person. So pretty much what we all faced in March when the shutdown first happened. And then there's going to be a mix, and I think that's probably what most of everyone is going to be facing, where students will attend school in phases. So either, rotating days, rotating weeks, and you'll be using a mix of in-person and virtual scenarios. And then in person, I think is my picture in the way? I don't know. In person, so that's going to be when we eventually get back to normal, the new normal, where everybody will be taught in school. There may still be some social distancing taking place, but for the most part, it'll be back to the way it was. So when I did my plan for the orchestra, I kind of broke it down into different scenarios. And so I took the timeline, and I started it in July because I know some of you are band directors and maybe thinking about marching band. So I know a lot of those are going to be starting soon. So we started in July and went through May for the whole school year. So you'll see that I've got a different types of scenarios. And so I just wanted you, and obviously this will change based on what your school district decides that they want to do, but it's going to be a way to think about whether you're going to be in person, whether you're going to be online only, or whether you're going to have a mix. And so you can set your grid up just depending on what your plan is and what you know is going to happen. This just happens to be one that I just kind of threw together. So you see that for this version, you would start with in-person in the fall, and then you would do a quick transition to online only, and then come back to a mix of online and in-person. This one would be all online until January, followed by a mix, and then followed by in-person starting in late spring. We may have a version of a mix of online and in-person for the entire year, or there may be a mix of online version for the entire year. So you, like I said, you can change this, and I will be giving you these slides afterwards if you have any questions. So another thing that has been really important to me is really looking at the science behind the virus. I like to learn as much as I possibly can, so I've done a lot of research. And there was a great article that I believe Rachael has included in your packet that really talks about how the virus is released into the environment. So when you look at when somebody coughs, a single cough is releasing about 3,000 droplets into the air, which can travel at about 50 miles an hour. Most of them are large and do fall quickly, but many stay in the air and can travel across the room in a matter of seconds. Now, when somebody sneezes, a single sneeze releases about 300,000 droplets, which travel at about 200 miles per hour. So you just need to be thinking about the fact that the droplets are in the air, and that's kind of been the driving factor of all of my decision making for the orchestra, at least to date, is really thinking about how the virus is transmitted and how to keep people as safe as possible. So a few thoughts. Studies have shown that the virus lives in the condensation that comes out of winds and brass, so we need to remember that. There is a study coming out in mid-July regarding aerosol coming out of instruments, which will be very important to planning, and I'm waiting for that, and I know a lot of my orchestra cohorts are waiting for that as well. And at this time, NAFME has come out and said that no in-person singing is really their recommendation. So the risks that we need to consider and keep in mind: there is insufficient scientific evidence to support the safety of playing wind instruments in an indoor space. So there really has not been a study. There's been a couple of articles that have come out, but they're not really based in science, and they really are not supported with science. So take all of those with a grain of salt. Remember that practice rooms are small spaces, which might be easily filled with aerosol. The particles may take hours to settle and could still remain infectious on surfaces even when settled from the air. The wind instruments involve deep breathing, sometimes forceful exhalation, and possible aerosolization of the mucus in the mouth and nose, along with secretions from deeper airway structures. There is currently no scientifically validated method of cleaning or disinfecting instruments, especially the woodwinds. And at this time, the safest course of action would be to not play wind instruments in school until the current studies are complete. So in a school setting, I think a question I just posed this is not allowing students to play an instrument even an option? And I know that, you know, for me in the orchestra world, I can say we're not going to have anything in person with a mix of winds and brass for quite some time until I know further about that study. But you guys may not have that option, so I recognize that. So I think your goals really in thinking about this is to come up with scenarios that can be quickly and easily tweaked, assign budget implications to those scenarios and communicate it with your administration, and then look at the scheduling implications and also communicate those to your administrator. And these are things that I'm doing even today. I'm updating one of our scenarios and assigning new budget plans to it and seeing how that's going to impact our schedule. So what does that socially distant model look like? We all heard the 6-foot rule. So how do you safely have in-person instruction? Smaller ensembles are definitely an option. No sharing of instruments is very important. The socially distant classroom setup, and then cleaning and disinfecting protocols. So things to think about when you're thinking about your classroom, and I had to think about this with our stage. You need to measure your space. Look into if there's larger spaces that you have access to, maybe the cafeteria. If the cafeteria isn't going to be used, I know a lot of schools are talking about using the cafeteria as classroom space, but maybe that is an idea of a space where you can hold a larger rehearsal space, or the gym. Come up with your plan. Tape out the spaces on the floor to maintain 6 foot of distance between the students and assigned seats. You want to avoid giving them the option to roam around and pick a different spot. I just heard this, that the conductor, meaning you, the teacher, should plan on standing 10 to 20 feet away from the first row of musicians. The study that I just read today recommends that you use a shield or goggles. Definitely a mask, that's for sure. No sharing of stands, music, and instruments. And cleaning protocols, what you can have the students do, what you would need to do, etc. And then how the students are going to enter and exit the space safely. So think about traffic flow. So this is what I did to lay out our space to figure out how many people I could get onto our stage at one time. And I actually just adjusted this today based on the new study. It said you need 10 feet. So this shows 10 feet around the conductor. Each square represents 1 foot. And on our stage, which is 57 by 32, we could fit 51 musicians. So, if you stagger them like I did, it gives you a little bit more flexibility. The first time I laid this out, I could only do 44. So just kind of play around with it. But this really helped me to visualize how I could set it up. And this is just a simple Excel spreadsheet that I just made all of the squares the same size and used color. And it's been very, very good tool for me. Budget implications. So it's important to think ahead and tell your administrators what your needs are, because the last thing we want them to do is to decide that because the arts are difficult to figure out how to make it work, for them to just say, well, forget it, we'll just get rid of them. And have multiple options to share, and plan for different budget scenarios with each version of your schedule. So you need to think about the additional instruments to prevent sharing. If you have to purchase anything in addition to what you already own in your classroom. Excuse me. Additional music to prevent sharing. You may need to make copies, think about copyright laws, that sort of thing. Additional stands. If kids are not sharing stands, you may need to purchase more. The appropriate cleaning supplies that you're going to need to clean your space. Technology needs for virtual learning, whether it's a program, and I know that Britt, I think, is going to be talking about that in a little bit too. Scheduling implications. So thinking about the fact that you're going to need to allow time for cleaning in between groups. So every time a new group comes into your classroom, you should have had time to sanitize all the chairs, sanitize the and disinfect the stands, the whatever else has been in the room needs to be sanitized and disinfected. Think about the fact that you may be doing a mix of in-person and online at the same time with different groups of students. I know that there are school districts thinking about having in-person, half the kids come in person one day and then the other half come the other day. So you may be required to do a mix of in-person and online. How does your rotation schedule look if it's daily versus weekly? If you're rotating, kids back and forth every day versus rotating kids back and forth every week, I'm sure your schedule will look a little different in both of those scenarios. And then what does it look like to do a timed schedule for larger ensembles? I read one thing, is it possible to get your district to allow kids to be pulled out of class so that you can maybe only do trombones at 10 o'clock and then you do trumpets at 10:45 or whatever your schedule is. But that could be an option as well. So really think through different versions of what you think you can handle. And that's all I have. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if anybody has any questions.
No. I don't see any questions yet, but I just wanted to, with the fact that we have a lot of people joining from a lot of different areas, and a lot of people's school districts will be making different decisions. How have you thought about, because I know that we're dealing with this right now at the Symphony, of quickly changing things and how pivoting works in your brain, of having to completely change your plan really quickly without, taking up all of your time?
Right. So when I first started planning for this season, I tried to think about it in a way that would give us the most flexibility right away. So when we first started planning the schedule, I planned specifically concerts that would start in the fall, and then I had a break in the schedule from mid-December all the way through mid-March, and then brought us back in March. So I was allowing for time when the classes or the concerts would most likely not be able to happen. I also thought about the concerts in a smaller way. So I wanted to make sure we could have no more than 100 people on the stage at a time, because at the time, that was what they were recommending, was smaller groups. So we got rid of concerts or changed concerts that would have a larger group on the stage at any one time. So that way, if it did come to the point where we could have a concert, but we couldn't have an audience, we would already have been planning for a smaller concert. And that has allowed us really to be able to keep it switched around.
Yeah. And then, so like from the perspective of teachers who are planning for a year, which I don't know if any of you watched the press conference yesterday with Governor DeWine, but he said within the next week, they're going to be sending out guidelines. But in the same breath, he said, it's going to be very flexible. And the way I interpreted that is it's going to be very vague. There's going to be a lot on the shoulders of teachers to be the problem solvers. And to work with their administrations and to work with curriculum directors to figure this out. So I know that Gail will talk about this a lot later, and that we're about to get into really specific examples. But I think, being able to think concretely and have concrete plans will really be valuable for teachers moving forward, so that they can give validity to what is their plan.
Right. And I think with the task force that I was on, there's been a lot of similarities with everything across the board. So you can count on masking, you can count on 6 feet of distance as being, standard guidelines, and all of the guidelines for reopening are on the Ohio website. So I would definitely look at those, and you can make assumptions based on what has already been put out.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right. So if no one has any specific questions right now, Michelle, I'll go ahead and ask you to turn off your screen, and I'll invite Denise to the screen. Denise, if you want to go ahead and turn your camera back on. So Dr. Denise Seachrist accepted her appointment as the Dean and Chief Administrative Officer of Kent State University at Stark in February of 2016. She previously served as the interim dean at Kent State Stark in 2014. The Stark campus is Kent State University's largest regional campus and the only public university in Stark County. Prior to coming to Kent State Stark, Seachrist was the director of Kent State University's High A Gloucester School of Music since 2008. She previously serves as interim associate provost, interim dean for academic and student services, regional campuses, and interim assistant dean of Kent State University of Trumbull. Seachrist received her PhD in musicology, ethnomusicology from Kent State University, and a Master of Music degree in vocal performance from Youngstown State University. She earned her bachelor's degree in music from Heidelberg University. So if you want to go ahead and get started, Denise, I'll turn off your camera.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, so I just completed 32 years at Kent State University and have been in a variety of roles and have been a faculty member and an administrator now for several years. So I'm viewing all of this from as many perspectives as I can. So in addition to Kent State University at Stark being the largest of Kent State's 7 regional campuses, for those of you who are outside the area, Kent State University is the 2nd largest public university in the state of Ohio, right? And it vacillates between Cincinnati and Kent State. So we vie for 2 or 3 behind the Ohio State University. But there are 14 public universities in the state, and the Inter-University Council of presidents of those universities, of the provosts of those universities, of folks in my position, the regional campuses, we're known as deans and chief administrative officers. We meet regularly in our own groups, our own cohorts, and then across the way. So we've been planning for this and have decided that as the public institutions, we should try to come up with a plan that, not any one of us is an outlier, if you will, so that we're trying to work collectively and sharing best practices along the way. So at Kent State University, the decision was made that we would follow a single plan, and our mascot were the Flashes. So we've come up with what is known as Flashes Safe 7, which talks about the wearing of masks, hand washing, social distancing, all of that. On our Kent campus, of course, that's a residential campus, and my other colleagues on this call will be speaking from a residential campus perspective. We, in the regional campus system, we're non-residential, so some may think that that helps us in a way that we don't have to worry about students living in community and getting sick and spreading the disease. But the fear on the flip side is we will have a more transient population going back, interacting with family members, others on a daily basis, going to work. The majority of our students work either full or part-time while going to school. And so that brings its own set of risks as well. So that being said, we understand, though, that each one of our communities is very different from the others. And as I said, there are 7 regional campuses in Kent State, all the way from Ashtabula County down to Tuscarawas County. And so collectively, we're a footprint of about 500 miles, or the size of the state of Connecticut. And so when there is a blizzard in Ashtabula and the dean says we have to cancel classes, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of us have to cancel classes. So what I'm trying to say is we do have a plan, but we've also allowed that each dean should have the flexibility to execute the plan or adapt the plan for our situation. So I'm hoping you will have that in your school districts as well. Kent State, we firmly believe, looking at the research, that there will be a second wave coming. And so we have altered our schedule. Some schools are starting early. I've heard that maybe some high schools and elementary schools, some of the districts might even think about starting earlier than they already are. So we don't know that for sure. But at this moment in time, Kent State's planning to start our normal time, the end of August. But one thing that we're doing, we've eliminated the fall break, and we are sending students home the Friday before Thanksgiving, because everyone's predicting a second wave. Frankly, I don't think we've seen the peak of the first wave yet, but people are anticipating that normally when there's flu and cold season coming, there'll be this second wave. And so we're sending everyone home, and we know right now that those last 2 weeks of the semester will be remote instruction. And the idea is that final exams will probably take place before those last 2 weeks, so that major kinds of projects could be done then, and students would not necessarily be doing final exams, but rather be doing projects. We also, though, we understand that there are certain disciplines that need to have a final exam, and so we have, as you've heard Michelle talk about, using other spaces that are not normally used for classroom space or even testing space, large ensemble rehearsal rooms and things like that. That's what we're planning to do. But every one of our students will receive 2 masks. All of our faculty, all of our staff will receive a mask. We're also having masks for visitors who come on campus, and students who want to come and do the college tour visits and things of that nature, and their parents. Someone asked the question, well, are you going to make them give the mask back? And quite candidly, no. If we give you a mask, it's yours to keep. We don't. It's almost like when somebody says, may I borrow a tissue? I never let someone just borrow a tissue. It's their tissue to have, you know. But what we're doing, we're really focusing on technology. And in the music, I've been in great conversation, and my background is as a musician, as you've heard, and so I'm approaching this from that aspect as well. We have a very strong music technology program on our campus. In fact, we are the only campus that offers that degree. It isn't even offered on the Kent campus. And so there are certain classes, certain activities that we believe if we can't offer them in person, we can't offer them at all. And we don't want to do that. We want students to be safe. We want the faculty and the staff to be safe, but we want them to make progress toward degree completion. So we're piloting with our summer 3 schedule that will start the mid-July. We have a 5-week class where we have currently 8 students enrolled, and we have a way that they can come into our fine arts building, have it socially distanced, and they'll be able to do their work in that space, and we can clean the console in its place. The instructor can be in an isolated room. We've put plexiglass around certain things, much like you've seen in grocery stores and banks. And so we know that there'll be a way that we can do this. Of course, there's always risk, but when I can't sleep at night, I think that, you know, life itself is not without risk. So what can we do to make sure that we're doing the best for everyone so we can sleep at night? We're also looking at the technology. One thing that we did when we went into remote instruction in mid-March, we put more money into technology and beefing up our Wi-Fi on campus because we have students that have those technological needs. Michelle mentioned the idea about having half of a class with the instructor one day and then switching out with the other class. So if those students need remote instruction and they don't have access at home to Wi-Fi, we're making spaces available on campus in our computer labs so that students can socially distance in a computer lab and then wipe the spaces down. We've invested in stickers that say, sit here, don't sit here. We've put that out across, but we've also beefed up the Wi-Fi out in the parking lots because we know that sometimes someone might not feel safe coming into our physical space, but they feel very safe sitting in their cars. So there are places across campus in the parking lots where someone can sit, have access to the Wi-Fi because we've boosted it, and that's something we're doing. We're also, we've sent computers home with students. They're checking them out just like they would check out a book. And the other thing that we're looking at doing in our piano classes, we have a lot of piano classes and students don't have keyboards at home. And so we have some keyboards that we are allowing students to check out and just send the equipment home, keep track of it, of course, and then bring it back that way. So those are some of the things that we're taking a look at. But we're following the guidelines, and I am working with our county and city health agencies just to make sure, because we're dealing with things with food safety as well, and all of those things that we might be thinking about. So I think we could have questions at this point.
Awesome. I don't see any questions right now, but I wanted to ask you, as an administrator who is making, or you're making these decisions, what have you been saying and communicating to your teachers about what they should expect and what their expectations are? Because I think some people are in really good districts where they have really great communication, and some are in districts where they don't have good communication with administration. So what would be your recommendation, and what have you been telling your teachers about what to expect?
Well, one thing that we have done, I have had started doing every other week meetings with the entire staff and the entire faculty. And then they're free to come or not. And I've been meeting with different groups. So I did meet with all of the music faculty because they had different concerns. As you can imagine, our science faculty have different concerns. And there are some disciplines, they want to do it all in remote instruction and they think they can do it that way. I think about some disciplines, though, some things that you absolutely can't do remotely. And the example that I always use is glass blowing. I don't see how we could possibly conduct the glass blowing class by sending the stuff home and expecting someone not to do that well. But there are some things. But we have, as a university, and I know that not every district will do this, but we have made a commitment that anyone who is a faculty or a staff member or a student, if they don't feel comfortable coming onto our campus, we're not requiring them to do that.
Wow.
So I know that's a bold, it's very bold, but that's the commitment that we've made, and not everyone can do that. So our faculty are aware that we don't want to overburden the faculty, because it's not fair to faculty to have to do two completely different lessons, you know, one for the in-person and then turn around and do it again in a remote environment. And so we're figuring out a way to make it easy. So it's this hybrid kind of thing. But we do know that we have some folks who just for a variety of reasons don't feel safe coming on campus. They don't want to come on campus and they don't have to. But we also know that for some folks, they need to be on campus. They want to be in their space. And so we're making those accommodations for them too. The other thing that we've done, we have taken any money that we've received, the CARES money that came from the governor to institutions. We bulked up the not just the technology itself, but also the training for our faculty. And I have the luxury of having a really fine educational technologist on staff, and she and a couple of our faculty who are really skilled and gifted in online. And we've made this very crystal clear. When we're talking about remote instruction, it's not really the same as an online class. When I think online, I think asynchronous, and it's all completely, and the student can be doing it on their own time. But this is a remote. Think of it as a synchronous kind of class. It's like conducting a class like we're doing this right now, using this kind of technology. And it's daunting for some people. So we have set up day-long and week-long workshops and have a small stipend set aside for the faculty to go through the training, to feel more comfortable, to share best practices, because you know we're in uncharted territory, and it's important that people feel comfortable.
So it sounds like a good recommendation for teachers would be to get some technology training.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And start the conversation with the administrators. And I know sometimes that's, if you're a junior teacher and you don't feel comfortable, I think you go to the folks, if you have a faculty union, you use that to your advantage. You go to your senior colleagues, and you have to have the communication, though. You have to work with the administration.
Yeah, it's really pushing for what you know you need.
Absolutely.
And I think it's really great that, you know, I wanted you to speak because I know a lot of teachers are probably thinking right now, I wish my district was doing all of the things that Kent State is doing right now, because I know this is a really good example of what I think should be happening in our public schools that aren't right now. So how do we, and I know Gail's going to talk about this later with advocacy, but pushing for things like what you're talking about with access to Wi-Fi. And just to be clear, is the Wi-Fi in your parking lots available for anyone who comes and sits in the parking lot?
Well, we are the public university, and we're open. It's a public. We have people who, even though we've said that we haven't been open, we have still been open. People have come and made arrangements to use our library. They can't come in and sit, but if they have materials they want, they can reach out and we can do like a drop-off sort of situation. But we have a lot of people who walk our beautiful campus all the time. There are lots of people walking dogs, walking around the pond, using our tennis courts, using the track. But we've got our security staff out there reminding people to be safe.
Yeah. So people, if they want to, if students maybe need a resource for some of the teachers who have students that don't have access to Wi-Fi, that might be able to be an option for them.
Absolutely. And we could even tell you where are the best places to park.
Great. Perfect. Awesome. Wonderful. All right. Well, if no one has any other questions, then I will go ahead and invite Dr. Cooper to the screen. Thank you, Denise. All right, so Dr. Britt Cooper is the Chair of Fine and Performing Arts and Professor of Choral Music at Walsh University. He directs 2 university choral ensembles, the Walsh University Choral and the Walsh Chamber Singers, in addition to touring ensemble. He holds a master's degree in choral conducting from the University of Alabama and a doctorate in choral conducting from the University of South Carolina. Since 2012, Dr. Cooper has served as the director of the Canton Symphony Chorus. Dr. Cooper is also currently serving as interim choral director at Christ Presbyterian Church in Canton, and has recently performed as a feature conductor for Christ Candlelight Service concerts and the Summit Choral Society in Akron. So Dr. Cooper, take it away.
Thank you, Rachel, and hi, everybody. I've looked through the list and see friends and colleagues who are here today. It's good to see you all here. The first thing that I want to do before I even get into what we're doing at Walsh or anything like that is to advocate that everybody who is fighting these struggles to figure out what to do in the fall should really utilize every resource that is being provided by your professional organizations. All of them are going out of their way right now to provide as many resources as possible in order to help us be successful, to help us advocate, to help us talk to our administrations and show what it is we really need and what we're really up against, trying to bring the arts to our students in a meaningful way in the midst of this pandemic. I have included in the chat a link to a committee report that was put together by the American Choral Directors Association. I'm looking at it right here on my iPad. I think you can see that. This is the COVID-19 Response Committee report that was released just about a week ago. And this report was written by about 12 or 13 of my colleagues around the United States. And the thing that makes it so unique and so wonderful is that it creates general advocacy statements and instructional models, but then it digs deeper and actually provides scenarios for all the various levels of choral music, starting with middle, junior high, and upper elementary, through senior high, to collegiate, to community, youth, and adult community choirs, and music and worship. And within the context of all of those, they create a series of recommendations for 3 different scenarios: face-to-face with physical distancing protocols, hybrid instruction, and remote instruction only. And then at the very end of all of this, there is a huge appendix for resources for technology, resources for instructional models, resources for everything that we're fighting right now. So this is about a 100-page document, but it's really, really good. It's very user-friendly and intuitive. And if you haven't had a chance to look at it and you're a choral conductor trying to figure out what you're doing in the fall, this is a great place to start. So in terms of what we are doing at Walsh right now, it's very, very fluid, as it would be with everybody right now. We have had a task force that's been working for the last 3 to 4 weeks trying to put together a plan to reopen the campus. We've been shut down since March, and everybody has basically been working from home with the exception of a very few people. And we are going to begin the process of slowly bringing the campus back to life, starting in early to mid-July and working up to the beginning of classes in August. And so that committee is about to release a report to us that's going to tell us about all of the protocols that we're going to be following and all that sort of thing. So we're still in that process right now. One of the things that we have done, though, at Walsh to allow ourselves more flexibility is move from a traditional 16-week semester to 8-week sessions. So we basically have 2 8-week sessions in the fall, 2 8-week sessions in the spring, and then an additional 2 8-week sessions during the summer, basically splitting the traditional semester in half. And so students will focus on 2 to 3 classes in the fall, in fall 1, and 2 to 3 classes in fall 2, rather than doing them over 16-week semesters. That just affords us more flexibility. You know, we can say that we're on for these 8 weeks, we're off campus for these 8 weeks. We've been talking about going to a model like this anyway, and then the pandemic just sort of forced the issue and caused us to decide to go ahead and make this move now and make the transition right now. So as we speak, we're in the midst of finalizing the new version of the fall schedule and making whatever adjustments to student schedules that we need to. So it's actually a very busy time for us, even though students aren't on campus and we're not doing a lot of teaching during the summer. So basically everything we're doing is done with the idea that we need to create more both and scenarios and fewer either or scenarios. We need to be able to be flexible and provide students with both an on-campus experience as it becomes safe and as we develop safe procedures for doing it, and then also moving to online instruction when we need to and when our students feel it is in their best interest. I had a student in my choir who was both asthmatic and there was some other underlying condition too. I'm drawing a blank right now. But as soon as cases started coming up in the state of Ohio, he moved off campus almost immediately, and we supported him in doing that, and we provided opportunities for remote learning even before we shut down campus, even before we went into sort of our lockdown mode. So moving forward for chorale and band and things like that, we are trying to, again, to create as many options as possible. We have no expectations of doing any live performing during the fall semester. And so as an example, one of the things we anticipate is that our major concert for the entire year is a Lessons and Carols concert at Christmas time. And so what we think we're going to do is marshal our efforts towards creating a really beautiful virtual version of that concert. That will involve virtual performances by choral ensembles, by individual singers, potentially by our percussion ensembles, perhaps by our band if it's safe to do so, and we will proceed sort of building that event from the beginning of the semester. It gives us basically 3.5 months to record it in bits and pieces as we learn things, because learning anything musically in a virtual environment just simply happens slower, doesn't it? We all know that. But the other thing that we're doing that I think is really, really critical is we are changing our focus a little bit. We tend to be performance driven, as we all are. And right now we are accepting the reality that perhaps this is a good time to become a little bit more skill based in terms of our instruction. Change our focus a little bit and say, what should be the things that come out of this time of remote learning that could ultimately make our ensembles better when we're on the other side of it. And so we are hoping to build within our virtual experiences and our remote teaching and our online teaching capacities for our students to become better musicians, better listeners, better readers, and potentially better singers. There are a lot of online portals that are out there that are popping up for virtual learning. There are even talks of some virtual rehearsal portals where the latency has been reduced to almost nothing that are hopefully going to come out in the next couple of months. There's one by a company called WebEx, WEBEX, that reduces the latency so that if you're online, you don't have the delay that you have with a typical Zoom rehearsal or something like that, so that you can actually almost hear each other in real time. There are going to be a lot of other resources coming out about the same time that will make it hopefully possible for us to do a little bit of in-person rehearsal at a distance, smaller forces. The company that produces black folders, the Black Folder Company, is coming out with a mask that is intended for singing. It kind of balloons out a little bit more. It still accomplishes what the mask is supposed to accomplish in terms of reducing the amount of droplets that are emitted into the air, but it does so in a way that makes it more comfortable to sing. And so if you're able to use a mask like that, plus a larger space with the students way apart, and you've got, as Michelle mentioned, singer or the conductor 10 to 20 feet away, then there's the possibility that we'll be able to do some small ensemble rehearsals. And we're very hopeful that we will be able to do that, because one of the things that these ensembles mean to these students, it isn't obviously just the act of making music. If that were the case, then doing virtual choirs and things like that would be sufficient. But it's the community, it's the togetherness, and it's connecting with other people. And there are parts of that you simply cannot replicate in a virtual environment. And so if it is possible for us to do a hybrid experience that allows us to have some togetherness, we will advocate for that, provided that all of these all of the studies that are going on right now show us that there is potential for that, and that it is something that can be done safely. So we're going to hopefully come up with some sort of plan that is a hybrid experience between some online instruction, a little bit of in-person music making, and hope for the best, and hope that that's something that we can advocate for and make happen. If it's not safe, clearly we won't do it. But if we can create the right combination of masking plus social distancing, bigger rooms, we also have rooms that we can do that with, and we'll try to make that happen. We have done several virtual choirs already at Walsh University. A lot of us who are probably on this call have become far more acquainted with video software than we ever thought we would, or ever thought we wanted to. I numbered myself among them. And I wanted to talk just a little bit about virtual choirs. Virtual choirs do not have, that there are obviously limitations, and it's not the same art form. When you were creating music asynchronously in an asynchronous environment, you're not doing the same thing as you do when you sing together. And we all should begin with that basic premise. But there is value in the process of having students go through the recording and using the tape, or using the click track, or however you've done it with conductors on YouTube or whatever else. There is a benefit to creating that independence. It's a little scary for some singers, but it also, I've actually been surprised to discover that I've had some of my singers who have actually sort of come to life and become more confident singing in a room by themselves. Just that they've allowed themselves to be more of a part of the ensemble in a way that was surprising. But this is a way that some people actually make music in the real world. I mean, there are professional musicians where somebody will lay down a drum track in Nashville somebody lay down a guitar track in Los Angeles. This is the way some people actually make music, and just to have that experience and to share music in a different way has value and has merit, I believe. And so as tedious as the process can be, I think it's worth investigating. If you've not done it, if you've hesitated to do it and you want to try it, but you're scared to death, there are colleagues around who have done a fair amount of it. I've done quite a bit. John Peterson at Malone has done quite a bit. In fact, he is assisted with virtual choirs with some of the local high schools, as well as a couple of community choirs. So he's a great resource for that as well. So embrace the technologies that we're using. I don't think they're going to go away, and the more you can learn about them, the better. There are some user-friendly versions of these softwares out there that are free, that don't cost anything. There's one called DaVinci Resolve, which is a video audio editor that has been used by some of my colleagues. They've said it's very user-friendly, a little bit more intuitive than using something like Adobe Premiere Pro, which is like professional quality software. So, you know, embrace the technology and then prepare to be flexible. Create a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and prepare to have a plan F, because the first three probably aren't going to be right. I think that's it for now.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. I really, the point of skill over performance, and the idea that can actually make the program stronger in the long run.
Yeah, the trick to that is going to be convincing administrators that's a good idea.
Yeah,
because they're going to go,
see the band.
but they want to see a product, which is why for us we're going to have some sort of product to build towards. Yeah, that's why I've decided, you know, I think I want to advocate for a virtual version of our Christmas concert, but you know, that isn't the singular focus necessarily of what we're going to be doing for the next 3 to 4 months, because it really shouldn't be and it can't be. Again, learning music in this environment simply happens slower. You cannot, I mean, we will learn 5 or 6 pieces in the time that it would take us to learn 2 concerts worth of music, probably, and be able to actually create a virtual rendering of it that sounds decent. So it's going to be slow, it's going to be tedious, but the flip side of that is it creates the opportunity for you to focus, as you said, on listening and on literacy and on just educating them about the other music that's out there. I think is also going to be valuable. And so sharing all of the other wonderful choirs that are making music and just sharing that beauty with them is going to be something that we're going to do too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think we'll go ahead and turn it over to Jason. I know some people were sharing the resources you talked about in the chat, so that's awesome. So I'll go ahead and invite Jason to join me. Jason Wyse serves as the Director of Bands, Coordinator of Instrumental Studies, and Director of Music Educator Preparation at Malone University. He directs the University Symphonic Jazz Band, Jazz Ensemble, and the Pioneer Spirit Marching Band. He also teaches coursework in music methods, instrumental conducting, and applied horn. Previously, Mr. Wyse directed high school bands for 15 years, most recently as the Director of Bands at Brecksville Broadview Heights High School in Ohio. Mr. Wyse is currently pursuing a Doctor of Musical Arts degree in music education from Boston University. He earned a Master of Music in Wind Conducting from The Ohio State University in 2003, studying conducting with Dr. Russell Mickelson, and a Bachelor of Music from Grove City College in 2001. Mr. Wyse has presented at the OMEA Professional Conference and is also an active composer. So Jason, if you want to unmute yourself, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. This is weird not seeing everybody's faces. It's hard to talk to a group when I only see myself, but I'm glad you all are joining us today. So I'm going to share, obviously, from the band side, kind of my understanding of what we know, and then a little bit about what Malone is doing specifically. So I'm going to share my screen, if I can here. There it is. Okay, so these are just my notes, and I'll put this whole document in the chat as well when we're done. But I guess before I start, I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that things seem to be kind of all over the map as far as what bands are doing, what bands are planning, and I think everyone's doing the best they can with the information we have. And we do know, as Michelle mentioned, there's some really important studies that are coming out in mid-July, and we're all anxiously awaiting those because those will directly impact our practices regarding aerosols and wind instruments and singing. But until that comes out, people are trying to make the best decisions they can to keep their students safe. And so I just want to acknowledge that, and I just want to say, that's all. Just be compassionate with one another. I've seen some people get very heated, and it's when we're talking about student safety and on top of things we're passionate about with making music, it can get kind of heated. But I would just encourage us all to just be compassionate and understanding with one another, because what works for one district may not be the direction another district goes. I've seen some things about some bands that are starting up in Texas, and the safety measures they put in place and seem to be working for them, and for others, they're going a different direction. So I just want to acknowledge that it's not going to be one mandate that's going to work for all bands, but we're all trying to make those decisions as best we can. So that kind of being said, I want to share, and as we all know, everything's changing really quickly. So there was communication that was just put out last night by Mark Speed, who's the president of College Band Directors National Association. And I've come to really respect this organization, and they're really connected to the science and the best practices right now. And this was put out in response to some college bands that were starting to, you've probably seen a couple of bands that just said, we're not going to march. I think it was UConn, if I'm remembering right. And then I think the AAC athletic conference that said bands won't be involved, I believe, as of yesterday. So this was Mark Speed's response. I'm not going to read it to you word for word, but it's more of an advocacy statement, just acknowledging the fact that the science is not out yet. And there's two sides to that coin. Obviously, the science isn't out as to whether it's safe, but the science also isn't out as to whether it's dangerous. And so we're trying to obviously walk the line there in between with what's best for our students and our programs. But this was his statement just to put out to say there's no definitive evidence saying that we cannot do marching band. It's kind of the gist of his statement here. And he cites a couple of studies that show how being outdoors significantly reduces risk, which is encouraging for marching bands, obviously with social distancing in place. And again, not all these studies are scientific and peer reviewed, but these are kind of what we have now until those studies are made public. So he just concludes that evidence that we have now suggests that the risk is not extremely high. In fact, it may be less. The fact that we're playing outside, but obviously there are adjustments that need to be made. So I'll put his statement into the chat as well. As I mentioned, there is a scientific study going on. We're all looking forward to that, coming out of the University of Colorado, very specific to our practices. I want to point out one specific collection of resources. I'm going to paste it into the chat right now, but this is a folder that contains the CBDNA's information, and it's constantly being updated. So it's the most current stuff. And I can't find my chat window.
It's okay, sure. Jason, if you want, all this information is also in the packet I sent out to them. So that link is in that packet I sent out. Okay.
All right, excellent. I'll check that link, because when I tried the link earlier, it didn't work. So if I find a different link, I will send that out. But do recommend I was really impressed with all the documents in there. Very current, again, constantly being updated. So if you're getting overwhelmed with all the resources, that's a good place to go because it's all kind of there, and they do a good job collating that. So I want to move on. I'll talk a little bit about what Malone University is planning right now. And obviously everything's in flux, but this is kind of where we are today. We are planning on campus instruction. That being said, we have modality options. So each professor can choose for each class which modality they want to use. Fully in-person, asynchronous online, or synchronous remote. In-person, obviously, is in-person with social distancing and hygiene, sanitation, and all those guidelines met. The asynchronous online is kind of what we did when everything was shut down at the end of last semester, where we're interacting with students, they complete work in their own time. Fully synchronous remote would be basically I'm teaching the class, but there's a camera in the room projecting what I'm doing in real time. So each professor will be able to choose for each class how they want to administer the instruction. Students will also have the option to select a modality. So if the instructor decides to be in person, the student can submit a request to take the class asynchronously remote, and they have to provide a rationale for that choice. We're upgrading all the tech in the classrooms. They're using, which I didn't know existed, but sound really cool, 360-degree webcams. So you get the whole room, and then if someone speaks in the room, the cameras face recognize that person, and sounds really, could be really beneficial for the remote instruction. So those things will be updated. Social distancing, obviously, is going to be in place. Classrooms will be spaced out. Alternate class locations will be examined. They had also indicated that all class meeting times will be limited to 60 minutes. So classes meet an hour and a half. For example, band rehearsal, we typically rehearse for an hour and a half. We're going to be limited to 60 minutes just to reduce the time that students are together. Students will be self-screening. So this is one thing I know that we're all wondering about a little bit is we know that if students are symptomatic, if students are contagious, obviously they're not going to be permitted to rehearse, to perform, to come into the classroom. Question is who's monitoring that, who's screening that. So for us, we've determined that students will self-screen. We're going to expect that they take their own temperature, that they are responsible for their own well-being, and if they are symptomatic in any way, they can't come to rehearsal or class. Taking attendance is vital for contact tracing. Cloth masks will be standard on campus. Hand sanitizer all around campus. Enhanced cleaning of classroom spaces, disinfecting of hard surfaces. Preparing for adjustments, and this is what's been discussed too, and Michelle had done a great job talking about different scenarios for that, but being prepared to switch modalities if needed. So we start on campus, maybe at some point we need to make the decision to go online. We need to be prepared to make that switch. We're still investigating live performances. I think as Dr. Cooper mentioned, it's looking like it's probably not going to be happening this semester in the way that it has in the past, but we're still doing some looking into that. We're looking into the the ventilation of our rooms and all those considerations. Marching band specifically. So our goal is to preserve the heart of the student experience while making adjustments, and that's kind of the phrase we've adopted as we're considering what we're going to do. And what is the heart of the student experience? As Dr. Cooper mentioned, it's not just making music. It's more than that. It's community. It's fellowship. It's an experience. So how can we preserve that while keeping it safe? Is kind of our overarching goal. So as of right now, we're following the marching band guidance from NFHS, which is linked in that document as well. And most of the things, the bullet points below here, come from that that document recommendation. So our ensemble, one advantage, I suppose, is that we are a smaller marching band. So we have about 40 members, which makes it a bit easier for us to social distance as we need to. We're going to hold a rehearsal outdoors whenever possible. Drills will be set up for 6-foot spacing. When we're on break, students are going to be instructed to be 6 feet apart. When we need to be indoors, as I mentioned, we're going to limit the rehearsal time. We're going to focus on small group and sectional rehearsal primarily, and those will all be socially distanced and separated. Full band rehearsal, we can rehearse in our band room. We can fit. We measured it out, 6-foot spacing. We fit at 50% capacity in the room. That being said, we're trying to get data on the air exchange rate of the room, how that relates to the height of the ceiling, the size of the room, and all those things. We're waiting on that information from our facilities folks. We also have a large worship center. I know most public schools don't have a worship center, from my experience, but we do have the music building at Malone used to be a church, so we have a giant worship center right next to the band room. So that's another space that we can use to spread out, which is helpful. So again, with ventilation, we're looking into that. CDC says that having outdoor airflow helps. So we do have an outdoor door from the band room, so we plan to use that. Keep both doors open to encourage ventilation there. This air exchange rate, this came from the ACDA document Dr. Cooper mentioned. 10 to 25 liters per second per person is the number they had in that doc. And again, that's something that I honestly don't understand fully what that means yet, but we have that number and we're looking into the implications of that. One-way traffic flow in and out of the room and spacing out the lockers. So for hygiene, and this is again from the NFHS primarily, but if you're symptomatic, you can't be around. When we're not playing, we're going to use masks. People that don't have to blow into their instrument use masks all the time. No sharing of wind instruments, no sharing of hard surface equipment, sticks, mallets, flags without disinfection. No stand partners, disinfecting between rehearsals, hand sanitizer, and no community hydration. So the last section here for us, we're a little bit unusual in the fact that we don't have a football program at Malone, but we do support a marching band. So this allows us a little more flexibility in terms of performance opportunities. A lot of our performance opportunities come at being, guest college band at high school shows or high school football games. So from that standpoint, we're really tied to what the high schools decide to do as well. But we're also considering some out-of-the-box performance opportunities for the marching band that could be utilized if those performance opportunities just aren't available and aren't happening. We're considering shortening our camp, shortening our season, which again, we have the flexibility to do without being bound to the football season. So, if we end up starting our season and we find that we need to wrap it up early for whatever reason, we can do that. The last point I have here is transportation, and this is obviously affects marching bands for travel. So the best recommendations I've seen right now are for spreading students out on buses, wearing masks on buses. You unload the bus, from front to back, you load it back to front, so students aren't crossing paths. And the reality of that is you're going to need more buses, and that obviously impacts budget. So consider that, band directors, folks, if you're looking at traveling, just consider that you may need twice as many buses. And what does that look like? For us, we can go from 1 bus to 2. Where I used to teach, we had a larger band and we used 8 buses. And I don't know how you would do 16 buses if you had to do that, but that's definitely something to consider. Our loading crew, we're going to protect them with gloves, have them sanitize their hands before and after loading and unloading to try to make that process as safe as possible. And then the budget I mentioned, if you have to increase buses, if you need to purchase more instruments. Those are things you want to be thinking about, talking to your administration about as far as your budget. And that's then it's just a list of the resources I have beyond there. So at this point, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason, so much. Nothing in the chat yet, but I think it's really important. I really like what you said about being compassionate and being flexible and understanding that everything will look different. So just really understanding your situation. And I think these are really great resources. This will be in the document. It's sent out to you guys. You can use all these resources, and these are the questions to ask. Do we have access to more buses? Do we have access to enough stands? Do we have access, and asking these questions so that you know how to serve your students best, and being flexible moving forward. So I think that is a really important point. For the sake of time, I think I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next speaker, just so I know we have some. Oh wait, Lisa just asked a question. Never mind. Lisa asks, what have you heard regarding marching uniforms? We have them stored in the band room, and our admin is looking at alternatives.
I've seen a couple things on that. I've seen some bands are talking about going to a casual uniform that students can just, keep at home. They wear shorts and polos and baseball caps. So it's just theirs. They're the only ones that touch it.
Yeah.
But yeah, with community uniforms and keeping them at school, that does open up some issues. I think that if you do use formal uniforms, some people have said just having the students just keep them at home for this season. And do it that way. So those are the two things I've kind of seen right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, really good point. Alrighty, well, I'm going to go ahead now and invite Rachael to join our screen. Jason, if you want to turn off your screen sharing for me. Awesome, thank you. So Rachael Fleischaker teaches elementary music and middle school band and choir in Canton City Schools. Rachael is a doctoral candidate in music education at Kent State University. Her research interests include culturally responsive teaching, teacher evaluations, and assessment in music education. She has taught undergraduate coursework at the College of Worcester, Baldwin-Wallace, Kent State University, and the Ohio State University Mansfield campus. So Rachael, go ahead.
All right, well, thanks everyone. First thing I want to do is say thanks for sticking with us. We're about an hour and 10 minutes into this, and if you're like me, there's something about these video conferencing things that I don't know, I get tired of staring at my screen for a long time. So thanks for sticking with us. When I go to a professional development clinic, if I can take one, maybe two, what I call golden nuggets from it, then I feel like it's worth my time. So my guess is you probably already have those golden nuggets. So if you do, don't turn your screen off, but hopefully I'll reinforce some of that for you. I was very pleased to be invited into this group because they're very smart people with really big responsibilities, and they're in decision-making capacities. So it's nice to hear what's going on, what the thought processes are for the administrative side, for the teaching side, for the community aspect. But I know that that's not necessarily your position. That's not necessarily your perspective as a public school teacher. So I think right here, what I want to say is maybe we need to pause and take a deep breath. You've just received a whole lot of information, all good information. But don't get overwhelmed. This whole COVID, this whole pandemic, it's coming at us fast, and there's changes every day. It can be really easy to get overwhelmed. And so remind yourself to take a breath, remind yourself that what we're doing is finding temporary solutions. This won't last forever and ever, but we're going to talk about how we can best negotiate, how we can mitigate all the factors that we know. So that's the perspective I'm coming from, is what's going on with my program and what's my best response to it. So I just wanted to say, take a breath. We tend to worry about those things that we cannot control. So some of you that are on this call, I know very well, you're staring at 2 to 3 weeks and you're going to be having rehearsals with students. Or in 2 to 3 weeks, you're planning to have rehearsals, and maybe you don't even know what your district is doing yet, what the official plan is. That can be very worrisome because you're in limbo. Take it day by day, and hopefully some of the things that have been said today, some of the things I'll share will resonate with you and help you moving forward. Some of the things we can't control, a lot of us don't have control over our budget. So we have to think about what our resources are. A lot of us don't have control over scheduling. We would love to, but we don't always have that control. We're not the final decision maker. So I'll talk a little bit about that, about who to talk to and how to get your input in, because you know your situation best. But just to start out, I told Rachael, one of the things I'm going to try to talk about is what are the potentials, not the problems. We all know what the problems are. So how can we turn this into some opportunity, some potential for our program? And the most important thing to me, above everything else, is keeping music in the schools. That is so important. Not just because it's our job, not just because, we don't want to be out of work, but because our subject can give students something that no other subject can give. That's been alluded to already. Britt said, that community, that aspect of being together, that social emotional growth that you get out of music, you can't find that in a lot of other subjects. And just the music itself, the aesthetics, the way we can express ourselves. And in times of trouble, we need ways to express ourselves. So let's keep that at the forefront. Let's keep that on our brain as we're moving forward. Also, and everybody has said this so far, just be ready to be flexible. You can't think about, well, this is how it's always done. You have to think about what's a new way to do things. And I am perfectly well aware, amazingly well aware, that each and every one of us has different and unique challenges. Every single school district operates differently. Not every, and even within every school district, every building administrator operates differently. So you might have colleagues in your district that are doing one thing, and maybe your principal's saying, no, get it. That happens. We are all in our own situation. So what you need to do is act as your own agent. Gail's going to talk about advocacy. She's going to put in some ways to advocate. So I won't go into that too much, but just in your brains, have ways, have scenarios, have potential that can come out of this, and be ready to communicate that. So before I get too far into it, I will tell you, when I think about these scenarios, where I've gone, there's great sources. I think all of them has been shared so far. This is the Navneet Guidelines. So you can just go to the NAFME website, and they have posted, it's about a 21-page guidelines for how to open up music in the fall. That's a really good one. Also, and I just got this one yesterday, if you're not familiar with the Alliance, the Ohio Alliance for Arts Education, wonderful, wonderful advocacy group. I know Gail's going to talk about them. They just put out a report. And you can see it's for all the arts, not just music, but OMEA is part of that. So this was a really good guide. And that's a great place to go to. Britt, you've already talked about the American Choral Directors Association, wonderful piece. And then also on the ACDA website, I loved this. This is the entire thing from the Canada Association, all the provinces, and it's one page, love it. But it's just step by step. So those are some sources, and I know we get overwhelmed with information, so I'm not saying go right now. If you're like me, you're probably going to need to take a nap, maybe take a jog as soon as this is over, just to get your brain cleared. But those are some things for later for you to think about. So when I think about this pandemic, I think about the three possible scenarios. One being that we go back to school and we're in person. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to look like that. But if it does, if it's okay, you're going to be in school and you're going to have your students, what I would tend to think about, and again, this is in your packet. Okay, these are my thoughts. They're in your packet. You can add to it. You can ask questions, type them in the chat. But you need to be able to explain and talk about how you're going to have that 6 feet distance. Michelle had that wonderful graph. That's a great idea. Measure your room, space it out, have a plan. I teach general music and band, which is really interesting because I need a big open space when I do general music, and I need chairs for band, so we are constantly moving things. I'm going to have to think through, how am I going to do that? I did purchase what are called poly spots, and the gym teachers use them. They're just rubberized plastic dots. So my thought is I'm going to throw those down on the floor. And that way, go to this spot, this is your area, that kind of thing. So think about how you're going to do that 6 feet of distance. Think about those traffic patterns. My husband, as most of you know, is a band director, and he's like, on the football field, no problem, 4x4 squares, we've got it, that's the right distance. But that's not the issue, is it? The issue is, how do they get their instrument out of the band room? How do we get them from the band room onto the football field? So you have to think about that traffic flow, those traffic patterns. So have an idea of how you will do that keeps people distant and safe. How will the space be sanitized? We've talked about that a lot. And that's important. How are you going to keep things clean and surfaces wiped down? Also, that idea of eliminating equipment. I know Michelle suggested, if you can in your budget, purchase additional equipment, but I know that's probably not going to be an option, especially for a lot of smaller programs. So how are you going to disinfect? How are you going to sanitize? I have one bass drum mallet. That's it. That's all I have. So how am I going to make sure that is not spreading any germs? Just think through those kind of daily things. And also in terms of travel, I know Jason talked about this, but how will travel look? Or, maybe it won't work. One thing that my husband actually thought of, I won't take credit for this, is a lot of band directors, a lot of people who have, groups that travel have said, well, what if we just have parent drive? We'll just have the parents take them to the game, take them home, then there's no buses at all. And that's obviously, it could be a possibility, but we're thinking about, boy, if you've got 180, 200 kids in your band and you're asking for them to get there, think about the parking situation. We live right by Massillon Stadium, and on a regular game, there's no parking left. If we put another 200 cars out there, that might create problems too. So you just need to think through any idea you have to try to follow it to its logical conclusion. So those are some ideas that I had for the in-school situation. Also sharing music, consider making copies so that the copy can be destroyed, or sharing it out digitally. But of course, you want to make sure that you've communicated with the publisher, that you have permission to do that. I think maybe it was Michelle that mentioned copyright laws. You need to be careful about that. And I 100% agree with what Britt said about, we might have to approach this year just completely differently in terms of looking at a process rather than a product-based philosophy. How are we going to continuously make our musicians stronger? At the core, I think we'd all agree that's what we're about. We're about building musicians. And there's lots of ways to do that. It doesn't have to just be in a large group. So how might smaller ensembles look? How would that work? How's it going to look if you are looking at fewer rehearsals a week? So if you go on some sort of the kids come 2 days a week and they're home 3 days a week, you're only seeing them, maybe 2 times a week. How would that look for you, for your program? But how can we focus on that individual skill, utilizing process rather than focusing on product? So those are kind of the in-person things that I thought about. I'm sure you have a lot more. Again, if you have some questions, throw them in the chat. In terms of remote instruction, it was a little bit of a disaster for me this year. I'm not afraid to admit it. It really took me by surprise. I had to really scramble to get platforms together, to have ways to communicate with students, to reach out. Fortunately, this year I only have 350 students, which is a lot less than I normally have because I'm only in one building. It was a lot. It was a lot. And I have kindergarten through 8th grade. So I'm dealing with 5 and 6-year-olds all the way up through 11, 12, 13-year-olds and the independence level. So what I'm thinking about for next year in terms of remote instruction is finding out. My district did a really good job. I have to compliment Canton City Schools. They were on the cutting edge when it came to making plans for remote instruction. But find out what your district's using. What's the preferred platform? What are students expected to check into? Make sure you're comfortable with that. Set up the platform now. Don't wait. Don't try to do it as the students are learning. Hopefully I'm going to be a little better at that next year because I've had this experience. Work to establish how you're going to communicate with your students. That is so important. And believe it or not, high school teachers, think about how you're going to communicate with the parents too, because I have teenagers at home, and you can tell my 16-year-old son anything you want. Doesn't mean it gets back to me. So, have that open line of communication where you're expecting things from the students. You're also, there's a way, there's a vehicle, there's an avenue that parents can check that progress as well. Think about devices, because that was a huge issue. If your school is not one-to-one, then how are you expecting students to connect with you? Are they using their phone? If it's a phone, think about the Apple versus Android approach. There can be differences. I had a student who had an iPad. So she was using everything for iPad, except that it was an old enough version that she couldn't download the latest version of Google Classroom, which is what we were using. So she couldn't do any Google Meets with us until we got her a Chromebook from the school. Then she could log on with us. So she wasn't connecting, but it wasn't her fault. There was nothing from, her end. She wanted to be there. She just didn't have those devices. So you have to think through those obstacles. More specific to your program, establish how instruments are going to be lent out, because especially the larger instruments, kids aren't going to have those at home. So if we're going to have them using these instruments and growing as musicians on the instruments, how is that going to look for you? Is it possible? What can you do to keep them moving in the program? Above all, create those clear expectations. And don't overwhelm with technology. If it's all remote instruction, make sure you only have a couple of platforms that students are expected to check into, and prioritize those platforms. If they're only going to do one thing, what's that one thing they're going to do? Also, make sure they know how you're grading, because, students, they'll wait till the last minute. They'll only do it if it's for a grade, whatever. But you just have to encourage that. And I think above all, and this goes right in with the process over product, we have to encourage students to be okay making mistakes on recordings. That's hard for students, because they want to record it and they want it to be perfect, and they'll record and record and record until it's perfect and they can send it. You really want to stress that you are grading on completion, not perfection. They make mistakes in front of you all the time. And that's what I tell my students. Look, you guys make mistakes all the time in the classroom and on the stage during performances, but that's another issue. But, go ahead and encourage them. Just film yourself. Let me hear what you're doing right now. Can't help you unless I hear you. That kind of attitude. And then, of course, for blended technology, I don't want to take up too much extra time. How do we merge those two worlds? How do we have those platforms together? What I'm going to do, 100%, first day I see the students in person, I'm going to teach technology. We're not even getting out the instruments. We're not worried about singing. We're not doing any of that. I'm going to say, all right, what do you have? If they can bring their devices that they're going to be using, I'm going to ask them to bring their devices with them, because I want to go through the process with them. I want to know that they know how to, if they're using their phone, how they know how to record videos, but how do you upload that video onto the platform that I need it on? I'm going to try to work through that technology. So take that time while you have the students. If you're lucky enough that you're going to see them in the fall, make sure that you've taught them what the expectation is, for just in case there's another shutdown. I mean, I agree with Denise. I think that we'll definitely be looking at a whole year of ups and downs. So that might mean we have to go on remote instruction or continue blended. So definitely. And also with the blended learning, I think a really important piece for me is that I am more now than ever going to have to be very focused and very targeted in what happens when I'm with the students. It has to be very purposeful, because if I'm only going to see them once or twice a week, I need to be able to send them off with a very clear idea of what they can do on their own. And then when they come back, I need to be up to date with what they've done, so I can really focus in and hone in on where we're going to make the most progress, that kind of attitude. So that's going to be a new way of teaching for me. It's going to be a new way of utilizing my time and the students' time. It's going to be a lot, but I don't think it's impossible. I just think that's something that we have to be very conscious of, is using that time very, very wisely when we have them. Again, encourage participation, not perfection. So as I ran through the scenarios, those were my thoughts. They seem random. They probably are. That's me. But just to throw those out. And again, if you have some questions, if you have comments, put them in there. The best way that we can be strong together is to talk to each other, is to utilize. Mm-hmm. And then Rachel, just one little more piece is just that communication piece. It's in the document. But it's that idea of you're not the decision maker. You're not the person necessarily who's going to make the call for the district or make the call for the schedule. Mm-hmm. So what you need to do is kind of step up and utilize your network. So maybe you have a great, relationship with your principal, and you can just reach out and start that communication right now. Maybe it's a Board of Education member that you feel connected with. Perhaps all you have are the other music teachers in your school district. Utilize them. If you talk together, if you get together, then you can present more of a unified front to anyone. If you are on the same page, then no matter who you're talking to, you're going to be able to spread the message of what's really important. So just use that time. Use the time that you have right now. Use to reevaluate your music program. Really think about what's important to you. Mm-hmm. Prioritize what you really want. If you can't have the whole cake, which little piece are you going to try to tackle first?
Yeah. I think that those are really important things to think about. And I know some people in the chat were talking about different platforms that they're using for technology, and feel free to share, talk with each other. You can privately chat each other. But I think something that came to my mind, and I think Gail might touch on this a little bit with her thinking with Artful Living and Learning, but general music and the younger ones and socially distancing them. Like, no, you can't go, so how, like, this idea of how do we make it still feel, and like we're talking about community and fun and participation, but if we're in the classroom and socially distanced and they can't touch their friend, what has been your thought process with that a little bit?
Eliminating a lot of my folk dancing for sure.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's a really tough one, because with the younger students, the last recommendation I read was that anyone over the age of 2 should be wearing a mask. So I am looking forward to how creatively my students wear masks. I mean, they're going to be bonnets, they're going to be capes, they're going to be under the chin. Even just yesterday, I ran into school for something, and as I was walking out, a kid, Mrs. Fleischaker, out the window. Now this kid's going into the 7th grade, ran out, literally full charge, ran up to me to give me a hug. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this, this can't be the norm anymore. This can't be what we do. So it's going to be a lot harder, I think, with the younger ones because of their age and just of their, their social and emotional development. Mm-hmm. But in terms of general music, right now my plans are, like I said, I will give them spaces to be in. And we are going to do a lot of games, that you do by yourself. Does that make sense? A lot of rhythm, a lot of clapping, a lot of movement that is very non-locomotor movement. Mm-hmm. Also, we're going to have to talk about those smaller class sizes because I can't fit a full class of 30 into my room. Mm-hmm. Another issue, and I'm going to have to negotiate this, we all know that students, especially younger students, the line between talking and singing is very, very blurred because it's just a normal form of communication. It's not a special thing you do. It's just, okay, this is the game and this is how we sing it or whatever. So I'm going to have to be very deliberate about the activities that I choose so that I'm keeping them as safe as I can, while at the same time giving them the experience and building the skills that I want built. Mm-hmm.
I like what you said about with the older students, this idea of day one is we teach technology. Mm-hmm. I think maybe this idea with the younger students is day one, we talk about what's happening. And we need to all really understand and putting a certain amount of trust in these young people and showing like, I trust you to know that you need to keep each other safe and having these candid conversations that maybe we don't normally have, but maybe we should be having all the time. with students of that age, you know?
I think you're 100% right. I think that a lot of classroom teachers are going to be starting their year out that way. It's just social training. You know, to give a crude example, kindergarten teachers all the time have to talk to little boys about how to appropriately use the restroom. Because, and I know this as a parent, you train your child to go to the bathroom, you're happy that kid just went in and used the bathroom. You don't care that they pulled their pants down around their knees to do it. But that's not okay in school. You know, that's not, you know, that's that social process.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to have to teach that that new way of being.
Yeah.
And that idea of Mrs. Fleischaker loves you, but you know, you're not going to be able to come up and hug.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I think
that'll be a whole new world.
Yeah, Teresa Cooper just said our district doing a lot of social emotional learning and no teaching for the first little bit, and I think that's really important. But I do want to leave enough time for Gail, so I'm gonna invite Gail to join us on the screen. Thank you, Rachel, so much. Our final speaker is Gail Martino. She is the director of Artful Living and Learning, a Stark County preschool arts immersion program, which delivers engaging standard-based curriculum for more than 1,800 preschool students every year. The program is beginning its 14th year in the fall. She has been a curriculum consultant for the Stark County Educational Service Center in the areas of student assessment, fine arts, and social studies. She was formerly the district curriculum director in Minerva Local Schools and Louisville City School District. Gail has been a member of many nonprofit and arts boards during her career. She has been a Canton Symphony Orchestra board member since 2009 and is currently serving as board chair. Martino also chairs the Advocacy Committee of the Ohio Alliance for Arts Education. Gail is a community arts activist, participator, and fundraiser for Arts in Stark and the Stark County Council for the Arts. So Gail, if you want to take it away.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And I'm going to reiterate Rachel's thanks to all of you for sticking it out with us. And Rachel, I just have to say, and as a panel member, as we all talked about the things that we were going to share, I am so impressed with all the different ways that we're coming at this. I think a lot of work has been done already, and I hope you, the participators, those of you that are joining us, I hope you come away from this knowing that you're not going to be able to use all of this. But again, as Rachel said, I think with all of the different things that we consider, there are some definite gems. And I think there's some categories that have evolved. And what I'm going to do in my brief time, I'm going to give you my summary first. And actually, the summary of my remarks, I believe, summarizes what we've all said today. I think the first thing that we all need to do, all of us, is learn everything that we can about what's going on, about the options, and what we might be able to do, what the experts are saying, both medical experts, school experts, music experts. We just need to do a lot of learning past today, and I think we have some wonderful resources to continue that. And then I've heard, and you have all heard, we need to be flexible, but I'm gonna take that one step further. I think we need to be flexible within our flexibility, and by that I mean we're looking at all these things that might happen, knowing that we need to prepare for who knows which one of those. But the thing that we all need to consider is, as rapidly as things are changing, it might look one way in September, and it might look different in November, and it might look different in January. So those deep breaths that Rachel talked about, keep those in your pocket, because we are going to have to be kind to ourselves. We're going to have to forgive ourselves and our students and our parents and our administrators, because everybody's going to be doing the best that they can. And Jason, you mentioned that most of our public schools don't have worship centers. I think it might not be a bad idea for us to have a couple around in our public schools. I think we might need it this year. But lastly, I think all of us need to advocate for our program. And that may be advocating for a university program, a building program, or a classroom program. But if you don't continuously let people know not only what's going on, but why what's going on is so good, and all of the things that you are planning to maintain that level of goodness. So those three things are the summary of what I'm going to share with you. Learn everything you can, be flexible within that flexibility, and advocate, advocate, advocate. And thank you. About 4 out of the 5 previous panel members mentioned that I was going to talk about advocacy, so I won't forget. I'll end with that. But I do want to, I know Rachael asked me to talk a little bit about Artful Living and Learning because it's an arts program and we had to make decisions about how do we deliver this next year. So a quick definition, it's a preschool program, mostly because most of your districts don't have preschool arts programs. We have teachers teaching art, of course, in preschool. But as far as a structured arts program, it doesn't exist in many places. So I hire professional teaching artists. Some of them are arts educators, but most of them are teaching artists, to come into preschool classrooms for 25 weeks out of the year, and they teach 20-minute lessons that are music, drama, and dance, visual arts. Well, that is all 5, music, drama, dance, and visual arts. And these lessons involve instruments, actually manipulating art, working with the materials, dancing, using all kinds of materials and props to make it meaningful. Lots of things that presented problems for us as we looked at what the school year might look like next year. So what I'd like to show you first is a 1 minute, maybe minute and 20 seconds video. Cynthia Warren is one of our Canton Symphony Orchestra members. She plays the oboe and the English horn, and she also does many of our Canton Symphony children's programs, our Listen to the Library, Symphony Land, and some other things. But she works in the Artful Living and Learning program with the music lessons. And I want to give you just a look at what the program looks like, and think about the proximity of the children, the things they're handling, what they're doing, but also the level of excitement in the program, which is what we don't want to lose.
I know a song called The Gingerbread Man, and it goes like this: run, run, as fast as you can. You can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread man. Yeah, I thought you guys would know this song. I'm going to play how the melody goes on my xylophone. That's right, listen to this. Run, run, as fast as you can. You can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread man. You guys want to try and sing that with me? Yeah, let's try. Okay, ready? Run, run, as fast as you can. You can't catch me, gingerbread man. Oh, you guys are excellent at that song. I love it.
So that's kind of the look. Now, what I read just June 10th, Education Week, which some of you know, it's a national, very highly regarded publication that comes out electronic and hard copy every week to educators all over the state. They said in June the 10th, here are the 6 most likely scenarios for our classrooms. The first one is phased reopening. So in other words, maybe 2nd grade starts, and then a couple weeks later, 3rd grade, and then a couple weeks later, kindergarten, for whatever reason, but a phased reopening. Number 2 is a multi-track reopening. And in this way, that would be some children would go Monday, Wednesday, some Tuesday, Thursday. I know you've all heard about that. There's a lot of talk about that. 3rd would be a staggered schedule, which I actually did in high school, where some children go in the morning, some children go in the afternoon. 4th is the bubble schedule, and according to this article, this is the CDC's choice right now. Whether that's true, that's what the article said. In a bubble schedule, students that spend a lot of time together for whatever reason do school together. They come together, they stay in the same room, they eat lunch in the same room, they move around together. CDC's choice. A cyclical schedule where you're in school for 1 week And then you're off for 2 weeks. And the reason for that is if there is virus, to give it an opportunity to surface or not. And the last one is a year-round approach. Not what we typically think of, but it's where one group would come for 9 weeks physically in the class like regular school. And then that group goes home for the rest of the year, and another group is in for 9 weeks. So when you're not physically in school, you're doing online or some kind of virtual learning. Looking at all of those options, I thought, and I had a lot of people thinking with me, an advisory committee and all my 26 teaching artists, can we do artful living and learning? Can we come into the schools and do this? Well, for one thing, one of these teaching artists could be in as many as 26 to 28 classes a week. They are being exposed to and exposing themselves to 400 to 500 children, no matter what we do. There are a lot of issues with that. Some schools are already talking about maybe we're not going to have any visitors or even teachers that go from building to building. So maybe some itinerant teachers, instead of being in 3 different buildings, are going to be in one building. You know, that's an option. So that presented a problem. The idea of children sharing instruments, sharing materials, even passing around the paint and the paintbrushes. The more we talked, the more the problems just multiplied. And so what we decided to do, and I know that this is probably not going to work for any of you, but it's an option that maybe could be part of a solution, is that we are right now working on creating videos that will match the same time as our art schedule. So there'll be 20-minute videos, and the teachers will have access to 15 music, 15 visual art, 15 drama, 15 dance. And it is possible, as many of you have learned, it's possible to make them pretty interactive, even if it's in a video. So we're working on a list of how-tos to make those videos as rich as we can. That I'm not finished with this, but I will share it with Rachael that this is something we could share out with you too. It might be helpful because these videos need to be active. They need to be positive. They need to be exciting. They need to be purposeful. We can all do it. We just need a little practice doing it. So that is our response to it, because I know it's different. It's preschool. We don't even know what preschool is going to look like next year, but I had to do, as you have to do, is look at all the options and try to be prepared for whatever may come your way. The advocacy piece. Rachael did absolutely a splendid job with talking about advocacy. The only thing I would add to that is that you need to be talking to your building administrator, certainly, and to your colleagues in your department, in your district. If there's a newsletter for parents, any way that you can communicate, every time that goes out, there could be something about what's happening in music. Not just music is great because, or music is important because, and I would include that too, but I would be very specific about what kinds of things you're going to be doing through whatever the next school year looks like to ensure that that importance is maintained, that the vibrancy is maintained, and that the essence of why music education has to happen in schools can be done in a crazy world, because it's going to be crazy for the next year, maybe even a little more. So I would take every opportunity to get that in front of your parents, teachers, and administrators. Don't forget that curriculum director. And as Rachael mentioned, I was in that role a couple times, and many times the curriculum director is the one who decides what your role is going to be or what your materials list will look like, how much money you have. The last idea that maybe you haven't thought about, every board, every school board that I know is happy to have, not a lot of these because there isn't time, but if you get in touch with somebody and say, can I come and talk for 5 minutes to the school board? There's lots of people attend the school board meetings, as you know. And if you can have a parent come with you, that's even better, because that's another thing I've learned over the years. The school boards certainly care about students, and they certainly care about teachers, but the ones they really listen to are the parents. So if you can get a parent to support you with that, ask for 5 minutes. 2 minutes of it, maybe why music is important to the child and to all of us, but also specifically what you are doing to make sure that a rich music program and opportunities are delivered to the children no matter what happens. We've all heard those horror stories about music teachers already being assigned to be intervention specialists and other things. And while the administrators might think that's a kind way to keep that position, I think we need to upfront make sure we say, wait a minute, I've got a really wonderful and doable way that I can continue to deliver my program. So I know we're running short of time. I want to mention 3 sources for advocacy materials. I believe these are in our materials. As Rachel mentioned, the Ohio Alliance for Arts Education, OAAE. If you go to their website and click on the advocacy, you'll be amazed at all the things that are there that are tools for you, and they're helpful and usable tools. One that I just explored and looked to be pretty good is the Arts Education Partnership, that has quite a bit on there about dealing with the arts during pandemic times. So that's another one. And another one that I didn't realize how much they had, I should have known, but the Kennedy Center has also many ideas for advocacy and also for teaching the arts during a pandemic. So I thank you for your attention. And Rachel, I'll give it back to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone who presented. I'll invite all the presenters to join me back on the screen kind of for a final discussion. If anyone has any questions or just any discussion topics that they want us to dive into that we haven't yet, go ahead and put that in the chat. I just wanted to thank you all again so much for being a part of this and doing this. As an education manager at a symphony, a lot of what I'm looking at is what the teachers are going to be doing and how we can support the teachers, so you being here today so that we could give teachers just some tools, some starting points to think about was really, really wonderful. And I really thank you all for that. Any last minute things that the speakers want to say, any takeaways from this conversation, something that came to your brain that you didn't get to say before that you want to say now. We've got about 8 minutes here before 3 o'clock if we're going to be super sharp on time. But feel free, any last minute thoughts, anything you would like to share in this moment.
I'll just add that the people who are on this conversation right now, this is preaching to the choir, because you're the ones who are obviously already educating yourselves, but please pass along this information to your colleagues. I am really pleased to see Lisa and Jonathan on here because they are OMEA District 8 President and President-elect. So great ideas to pass on to D8 and even on upwards. Let's get Roger involved in the conversation. But the D8 is planning some more professional development. Yep. They're looking at ways to kind of get together as teachers. We are much stronger when we work together, and D8 has a really, really good network. I'm really pleased to say. So hopefully we can continue this conversation in other forms.
Yeah, and I know that we at the Canton Symphony are planning more professional development. At the end of this session, I will be sending out a survey. So if you all have things that you want to see, I know we're already planning a couple of sessions, but I'd love to know what you want to talk about. But I want to thank you all so much. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.